All right, if you're going to be out on the road today and you're traveling south out of the Eugene area, the further south you get, the more the likelihood that you're going to run into some fog. I guess down particularly Grants Pass, Medford, etc., down that vicinity, really, really heavy fog this morning. So just as a note for you this morning, that's going on. Joining us on the wake-up call, it is none other than Lane County Sheriff Tom Turner. Good morning, Tom.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
Hey, doing pretty good. How are you doing this morning?
Okay.
Okay.
It's another morning.
Yeah. All right. So, for folks that don't know, on Wednesday, you appeared at the Lane County Board of Commissioners weekly meeting, and you sort of dropped a bomb that apparently nobody really saw coming. And why don't you kind of fill the listeners in on what that was?
Sure. What we do is that this year, which was going to be, we knew it was going to be particularly financially tight, we had budgeted a piece of our corrections facility budget was based on how many beds we had at the U.S. Marshal's office, or how many beds the U.S. Marshal's office used at the facility. So we had anticipated about 70 beds a month.
Mm-hmm.
What happened is that we saw this all started July 1st, our new fiscal year. We saw that the numbers were starting to dip. We had 50, 41, and then back to 50, and it was looking like it was going to be a pretty permanent trend. And unfortunately, our budget is built so narrowly that any kind of fluctuation like that is really difficult for us. So I got a hold of the Marshal Service and asked if that was going to be, if I could expect that for the rest of the year. They said that unfortunately, that is more likely than not, that's where it was going to go. There's a number of factors. No one has been the absolute as to why it worked out that way. But either way, we had to immediately adapt and adjust for the lower numbers, because what that means to us is about a $750,000 deficit that we're going to be facing by the end of the budget year. So we simply can't have that. I had to balance that out, and in order to do that, we had to close some beds and lay off some deputies, unfortunately, and we're hoping that that's going to be enough to make the difference, and it's something we're going to have to keep a really close eye on.
So has that already happened? Have the beds already been closed and the deputies already been laid off?
No, that all happens by December 1st. There's a process, of course, to all that. And we had made our figures based on that. And again, to kind of let everybody know that, once again, unfortunately, we're reducing the number of beds here in Lane County down to just an absolutely horrendous rate. It was already horrendous. Now it's even worse.
So give people an idea. I mean, when you say horrendous, how many beds do you currently have that are open that will be usable? Yeah, we have 152 local beds. Mm-hmm.
And what that means, in the simplest terms, what that means is those are local offenders. That's where a person goes to jail if they're arrested here in Lane County by any agency.
Right.
And then, of course, these are all entirely felons, almost entirely felons. And then, based on who's in there and who has a higher dangerousness level, they'll be released quicker. Now the comparator, if you want to compare it to other Oregon counties, just to be average in Oregon at the 152 number, just to be average, and this is only with sheriff's offices in Oregon, we'd need to add 474 more beds just to be average in Oregon, and Oregon's already low. So if you took a national standard, any national standard, we need over 1,000 local jail beds for a population of 350,000, which is Lane County. So we're already operating at far below any Oregon average and hardly even statistically significant to a national average. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge hazard that's here in Lane County.
You say you have 152 beds that are open. I mean, is that after the 35 bed reduction, or
no? After the 35 bed reduction, we'll be somewhere between 135 and 140 beds. And what we do is we use the federal monies that we get from the leasing of the U.S. Marshal beds to offset the cost of the facility. So that's why the numbers aren't exact. We were and we will still get some revenue from the U.S. Marshal's office at 50 beds. So we don't want to lose that. And in fact, it is a bit cyclic, but in fact, this month, so far, we have 58 beds that the U.S. Marshal Service is using. So, there is some improvement here and there, but unfortunately, we certainly don't look like we're going to make what we anticipated, the use of 70 beds.
How big of a surprise did this come to the Board of Commissioners? Had you tipped any of them off in advance that you noticed this was going to be the case?
I had. As soon as we saw the trend, and then we had kind of the confirmation that the trend was going to continue, I notified the county administrator, and then we wound up having that as a piece of emergency business at the Board of County Commissioners meeting. And unfortunately, what this is getting to be is it's getting to be kind of typical for how we have to operate. We have an extremely fragile budget that's on such a horrible narrow margin that any kind of fluctuation like this is something that, when it comes up, it can mean some pretty dramatic changes to any organization, but certainly to ours.
Constitutionally, or maybe it's just Oregon statute. Is it or is it not true that really the only thing required of a quote unquote county sheriff or law enforcement organization is to operate a jail facility? Is that correct or not? Because I've heard that a couple of times, and I'm sitting here thinking about this, and with more cuts, you may be at the point where that's about the only thing you're able to keep open.
Right. Well, one of the things, and I'll have to email that to you, there's about 14 things that are set out in state law that we have to provide as a sheriff, that I have to provide as a sheriff. And unfortunately, all of them are extremely undefined. So, for instance, I'm supposed to conserve the peace in Lane County. It doesn't say how. It just says that's what I'm supposed to do. It says that I have to have a jail. It doesn't say how big at all. It has there's no definition around it. So, conceivably, if you had a jail and you you had a prisoner in it, you would probably meet the definition. It doesn't have any size requirements for the population that you serve, and all those things that makes it extremely difficult because there's no requirement, But the other difficulty is, of course, is that Lane County doesn't have any money, so right now it doesn't matter. We can't operate because we don't have any resources to run the darn thing.
Now, are you also looking at cuts? I mean, you have this year, which will get passed. I mean, you're funded out through the rest of this fiscal year.
Right.
Coming up in the next year, if I recall correctly, you're looking at even more cuts, correct?
Right. There'll be more cuts, not as significant as this year. This year we lost a total of just over $10 million in cuts to the sheriff's office. Mm-hmm. Now, that's probably the biggest year that we've ever had in the history of the sheriff's office at any one time. So this next year, we're also at a deficit, but it's not nearly as large of a deficit as the county as a whole faced this last fiscal year. But it could certainly mean certainly in the neighborhood of $1 to $2 million loss to the sheriff's office. But again,
on top of what we're dealing with this year,
right? It'd be more, $1 to $2 million more that we'd be at deficit as we come up on this next year.
All right, so $1 to $2 million more. What? How many more beds is that, and how many more officers' jobs is that?
Well, the problem that we have, of course, and we've talked a bunch about this, and people have heard a lot about this, but unfortunately it's got some complexity to it. The facility is built in different components,
right?
So it's you have to close one component or another. You can't operate the facility by I need to reduce 2 beds. You can't do that.
Yeah, you have to close a whole section,
right? So the next section would be 96 beds. And that's what it would take to make that kind of budget deficit that we're facing. And the interesting thing, there's a number of issues. I'm not sure the word's interesting, but there's a number of issues facing us at the same time, where patrol is predominantly funded out of the road fund, so it's not discretionary general fund money that funds the jail.
Right.
And unfortunately, you have to keep. When you get right down to the bottom line, you have to keep the very worst offenders and so that's our SegMed section that only holds 12. You could get down to some really, really bare bones numbers if you had to close down huge sections that we could possibly be facing if we had any more cuts.
Yeah, well, and you're also dealing with a situation that a couple of the public works unions are actually, or had brought suit against the county saying that those road funds were being used inappropriately, right?
Right. We've gotten some attention from some of the other unions, and it's all working itself through whatever legal actions they're pursuing. And that's something that we just have to wait and see the outcome of that. And unfortunately, what happens is every time you get to these huge financial constraints on any business or any county, as soon as one group's affected, it starts to affect other groups. And so nobody wants to be affected. and that's problematic, so everybody wants to kind of to defend their own, and it gets to be a very difficult time for everyone.
So, Sheriff Turner, honestly, why are you running for reelection? And I'm not, no, I'm dead serious. Why?
Oh, well, fortunately, I didn't have to wage much of a campaign.
Yeah.
And maybe now that's becoming more and more clear to me. Yeah. The county needs leadership, and it needs people to stay in these positions and stay in the top jobs to try and keep the county moving forward, because we're in a really, really difficult time. Fortunately for me, I spent over 30 years in this community. I'm in a relatively good position that I can continue to do this. I didn't expect it to be quite as difficult in this aspect. But one of the things that you need is, you need to be able to navigate through these times, and so hopefully I can lend something to that. But I completely agree with you. It is a I wonder about that a lot. It's a very, very trying time and extremely challenging. But someone needs to be here. I'm glad to step up to that position, and I'm only hoping that we can make it as good as we can.
I guess what, to me, makes your position and also Alex Gardner's position kind of odd and would be difficult to work with, well, maybe, and not saying that either of you are difficult to work with, but the situation is that, both of you are elected leaders, and yet in reality, you don't have a whole heck of a lot of say over your particular budget, because that budget is given to you by the board of commissioners. Right. I mean, they're the ones that ultimately decide, what your budget is going to be, and in a lot of ways, it kind of leaves, as an elected official, it kind of leaves, I would think, that you two individuals in particular in a very weird position.
Yeah, absolutely. The sheriffs, the DAs in our county or in our state, the county assessor, these elected positions, in addition to usually the board of county commissioners or supervisors, whatever group you're in. Mm-hmm. But what happens a lot of times, and I think which is certainly prevalent in our county, is that the DA, the sheriff, and the county assessor are subject matter experts. Yeah. I mean, that's how we get hired to this position. And so what we try to do is we try to give the very best advice to get forward, and it gets so difficult because now there's not a bunch of money to split up or any, the decisions are all pretty bleak, and we try to do the best we can. But one of the problems we're facing right now in Plain County is there's so many components that are broken or in dire need that it's hard to fix any one and make a giant improvement in livability. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right. These are very it's kind of an odd office as far as the way it is. It's a very traditional, long-term deal, and the electeds are able to, try and run their departments somewhat sovereign of a lot of the other business going on in any county or state. But the issues are everybody has to work together to make it work. So this is definitely a tough time, and I think it makes it for a much more collaborative approach because everybody's in trouble. So it makes it so we really work hard together rather than spend a lot of time with adversarial activities.
Lane County Sheriff Tom Turner joining us on the Wake Up Call this morning. I don't know if you can answer this question, or this would be more of a question for Alex Gardner, the DA. And that question would be, since the county has closed all of these jail beds, do we have any idea whether there's been an increase in the folks that are not showing up for their court dates? Because a lot of people that you have in there, I mean, part of them are awaiting a hearing, they're awaiting their court date, etc. Are we noticing more people kind of just skipping out on making those particular court dates now that they're not in jail?
Oh, absolutely. You're without any kind of punishment or criteria for people to follow. They won't do that.
Well, I guess can you quantify it?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that's probably the most significant to me, and Alex has a lot of these pieces really down. But one of the things that is really significant to me is that even though our capacity-based releases, and it shows all these people being released all the time because there's no jail space, one of the things that's most compelling out of that to me is that Alex isn't even filing on 26% of the felony crimes in Lane County. 26% aren't even getting filed, so those aren't even counted. These are cases that aren't even filed because of the resource challenges that they're facing. So the statistics are even, you look at the statistical information and, wow, this is a terrible problem. It's got to me, it's got a 26% hidden problem because of these felons that aren't even filed against, because they're perfectly good crimes. It's just we can't prosecute them because there's not enough resources. So here people aren't even getting contacted hardly compared to what it used to be, where at least everybody was contacted and went one way or another. Now we got a huge group that they aren't even getting any sanctions against them initially on good cases.
We're going to have to leave it with that, unfortunately. Sheriff Tom Turner joining us on the Wake Up Call this morning. Sheriff, thanks for being with us. We appreciate you picking up our calls, and I'm sure we will discuss further developments with the jail as the days, weeks, and months roll on.
Absolutely, Bill. Thank you for the call.
Yep. Thank you, Sheriff. It is 8:45, News Radio 1120, KPNW.